My friend invited me to her destination wedding in Mexico, then charged my card $640 for her wedding suite, after I'd already paid $2,180 to attend. When I refused, she threatened my room and shuttle until I discovered her suite was actually free and she was using guests to fund her honeymoon. My friend invited me to her destination wedding in Mexico, and I agreed only after she gave me the exact price. I paid $2,180 for flights and 5 nights at the resort. 3 weeks before departure, the travel coordinator charged my card another $640. The bride explained that every guest was now contributing toward the couple's oceanfront suite because hosting a wedding abroad was expensive. I refused and disputed the charge. The bride called me selfish, removed me from the airport shuttle, and warned that the resort might cancel my room. Then the resort's group manager sent me the contract by mistake. It showed that the bride and groom's entire stay was complimentary because our bookings had earned them a free room. Why were 40 guests being charged for a room that cost the couple nothing? And what was the additional $8,400 labeled couple accommodation actually paying for? My name is Olivia. I was 33 when my friend Sabrina married Luke at the Costa Mar Azul resort near Cancun. Sabrina and I met at our first job after college. We worked in adjoining cubicles, ate lunch together almost every day, and remained friends after moving to different companies. We were close, but not inseparable. I knew her parents, attended birthdays, and helped Luke plan the proposal. When Sabrina invited me, I felt honored but cautious because destination weddings shift much of the cost onto guests. Sabrina had discussed a destination wedding for years. She loved the idea that guests would treat the event as a vacation and the couple could spend more time with everyone. I once asked whether that meant she would subsidize rooms for relatives who could not afford the trip. She said adults could decide whether the experience was worth the price. That answer was fair. It was also why I expected the same principle to apply to her. Adults could choose the experience they could afford, including the bride and groom. Luke proposed during a weekend in Charleston. I helped arrange flowers in their hotel room and kept Sabrina occupied while Luke coordinated a photographer. Sabrina later told friends I was one of the reasons the proposal felt effortless. I mention that because I was not searching for a reason to damage her wedding. I had already invested time and love before buying a flight. I also knew my own limits. The previous year, I had paid off the last of my student loans and started saving for a condo. The trip was possible, but it represented nearly 2 months of savings. I needed the price to remain the price I accepted. I asked for numbers before committing. Sabrina sent a polished information packet created by a travel company called Sunpath Celebrations. It listed $1,540 for a single-occupancy garden room for 5 nights, including taxes and the wedding package. My round-trip flight was $640. Airport transfers were included. The packet stated that guests were responsible only for travel, their room, optional excursions, and personal spending. It also said no additional wedding fee would be collected. I saved the packet and paid a $500 room deposit using a credit card. The remaining room balance was divided into 2 scheduled payments. 38 other guests booked through the group. Most were couples, so the group reserved 24 rooms. Sabrina frequently reminded us that booking through Sunpath supported the wedding block and helped everyone stay together. Several guests made sacrifices to attend. Naomi used vacation days she had been saving for Christmas with her parents. Sabrina's aunt delayed replacing an old furnace. Luke's college friend brought his 2 teenage children and paid almost $5,000 for flights and lodging. Sabrina knew those details because she repeatedly asked guests to share booking status. She thanked everyone in a group video and said, "Your presence is the only gift we need." The wedding website repeated that sentence beside a note telling guests not to bring boxed gifts. Later, Sabrina created an online registry with cash categories for a future home, honeymoon dining, and spa treatments. I contributed $100 to the home fund before the extra room charge appeared. I did not resent the registry. I resented the idea that voluntary generosity could be converted into mandatory billing after travel became difficult to cancel. The financial pressure started gradually. Sabrina asked guests to wear specific colors to the welcome dinner. Then she added a catamaran outing for $170 per person. I declined the catamaran because I had already spent more than $2,000. Sabrina replied, "Of course it is optional, but it will be the main time we actually get to enjoy everyone before the wedding." I kept my decline. She became slightly colder but did not argue. 2 months before the wedding, SunPath sent an updated itinerary showing the welcome dinner, ceremony, reception, and farewell brunch. A new line read, "Couple accommodation contribution, pending final allocation." No price appeared. I emailed the coordinator, Melissa Hart, asking what the line meant. Melissa replied that the bride was reviewing optional guest contributions, and no charge had been authorized. I forwarded the response to Sabrina. She said the line was only a placeholder and told me not to worry. 3 weeks before departure, my credit card alerted me to a $640 charge from SunPath. I assumed it was duplicate room billing. Melissa replied that Sabrina had approved a $320 per adult contribution toward the couple's oceanfront wedding suite. Because my reservation showed one adult, but my card had briefly covered my friend Naomi's deposit too, SunPath charged 2 contributions. I had paid Naomi's initial deposit while her replacement card arrived. Naomi had already transferred the money to me and later placed her own card on her room. SunPath's record was outdated. Even a correct single charge would have been unauthorized. I called Sabrina. She said the suite cost $8,400 for 7 nights, and the couple could not absorb it after paying for the ceremony. 40 guests contributing around $210 each would cover the room. The amount varied by reservation. I asked why I was charged $640 without agreeing. Sabrina said, "Everyone benefits from having us there. There would be no trip without the wedding." I replied that I was already paying to attend her event and had never offered to finance her hotel. Sabrina said, "Destination wedding etiquette expected guests to support the hosts." I told her the original packet specifically promised no additional wedding fee. She became angry and said, "You make enough money, Olivia. This is less than you spend on a handbag." I own one designer handbag, purchased used after a promotion. Sabrina had helped me choose it 2 years earlier. The fact that she remembered the price did not give her a claim on the same amount. I asked SunPath to reverse the charge. Melissa said only Sabrina could remove the group allocation because the company treated her as event organizer. I sent a formal dispute stating that I had not authorized the new charge and attached the original packet. Melissa's response exposed another concern. She forwarded an internal form bearing my typed name beneath a checkbox that said I accepted group adjustments. The checkbox was completed on the same day Sabrina added the accommodation contribution. I had never seen the form. The email address associated with it belonged to the general wedding inbox controlled by Sabrina and Luke. Melissa argued that the original booking terms allowed taxes and resort fees to change. I pointed out that a contribution to the couple's room was neither a tax nor a resort fee. I asked for the timestamp, IP record, and full consent page. SunPath stopped answering my questions directly and referred the issue to a manager. That silence was why I opened the card dispute rather than trusting a promise to settle later. Naomi checked her records and found the same checkbox form. Her typed name was misspelled in the exact way Sabrina often spelled it. Naomi had corrected that spelling with SunPath months earlier, so the form could not have come from her current profile. We did not accuse Sabrina of forging the forms at that stage. We preserved them and asked SunPath to investigate who submitted them. My credit card issuer issued a temporary credit and opened a review. Sabrina removed me from the wedding chat that evening. Luke sent a message saying disputes with the travel company threatened the group booking and could cause everyone's rates to increase. He asked me to cancel the dispute and resolve the issue privately after the wedding. I asked him to refund the $640 first. He did not respond. The next morning, SunPath emailed that my airport transfer had been removed at the couple's request. Sabrina also said she could not guarantee my room would remain in the wedding block if I refused shared costs. I contacted Costamare Azul directly. The resort confirmed my room was fully paid and could not be canceled by another guest. The Shuttle was a private group service, so Sabrina could remove me from it. I booked a reputable airport transfer for $74. I considered canceling the entire trip. My airfare was partly non-refundable, and Naomi still wanted to attend. More importantly, I did not want Sabrina to learn that unauthorized charges and threats could control my choices. My mother thought I should stay home. She worried that traveling into a hostile wedding group would be miserable. My brother believed I should attend and enjoy the resort without engaging in conflict. Both offered advice without asking me to pay for their preferred choice, which was a useful contrast. I reviewed cancellation terms carefully. Leaving then would cost me about $1,460 in non-refundable airfare and room penalties. Attending with separate transportation would cost $74 more. Financially and emotionally, I preferred to go unless Sabrina explicitly withdrew the invitation. I wrote that decision in an email instead of debating it by phone. Sabrina later claimed I had threatened to crash the wedding. My email showed the opposite. I asked her to state clearly whether I remained invited and offered to skip private bridal events while using the room I had paid for. I told her I would attend as a regular guest, arrange my own transportation, and pay nothing beyond my agreed booking. Sabrina replied that my presence would make her uncomfortable. I asked directly whether she was withdrawing the wedding invitation. She said she was not uninviting me, but she expected me to understand the consequences of refusing to contribute. That vague answer protected her from refunding anything while allowing her to portray me as unwelcome. 2 days later, the resort's group manager, Carlos, emailed me. He intended to send a lodging confirmation, but attached part of the group contract instead. I immediately told him the attachment might be private. Carlos thanked me and asked me to delete it. Before deleting, I had read enough to notice a line stating, "Complimentary suite earned at 20 paid room nights." I did not use or share the accidentally attached contract. I asked Carlos a general question. Did group bookings sometimes earn a complimentary room, and was my personal reservation subject to any host accommodation fee? Carlos replied that my reservation was paid in full and included no such resort fee. He also confirmed that room block incentives were settled between the resort and group organizer, not billed automatically to guests. That distinction was enough. The $640 was not a resort charge. It was a separate collection created through SunPath. Naomi contacted other guests privately. 8 people found charges between $210 and $640. Couples were generally charged $420. Some assumed the amount was a tax and paid without asking. One guest, Sabrina's aunt, had been charged $840 for a room holding her and 2 adult daughters. If all 40 adults paid $210, the collection would total $8,400. Exactly the amount Sabrina said the suite cost. But Carlos's general confirmation suggested the room block had already generated a complimentary stay. I needed proof that did not rely on a document sent by mistake. Naomi found it in Sabrina's own wedding website archive. An earlier version of the travel FAQ said, "Book through our block because every 20th room night earns the bride and groom a complimentary night." The current version had removed that sentence. Luke's cousin found more evidence in a promotional webinar Sabrina had hosted for guests. During the recording, Melissa explained that the block would likely cover the couple's base room and possibly an upgrade if enough people booked. Sabrina responded that every reservation brought them closer to a free honeymoon experience. The webinar remained accessible through an unlisted link in an old email. It was not private resort material or an accidental disclosure. Sabrina had recorded and distributed it herself. At minute 23, a guest asked whether the couple would later divide any remaining costs. Sabrina answered, "No surprise charges. Once you book your room, you are done unless you choose excursions." That sentence matched the original packet and made the later collection impossible to describe as a shared understanding. At 24 rooms for 5 nights, the group generated 120 paid room nights, enough for multiple complimentary credits under the public language. Sabrina had edited the FAQ after most guests booked. I messaged Sabrina and Luke together. I wrote that guests were being charged for couple accommodation, despite public information showing the block earned complimentary nights. I asked for an itemized statement from the resort and SunPath showing the couple's actual lodging balance. Luke called me. He admitted the resort had comped 5 nights in a standard suite, then upgraded them to an oceanfront category at a reduced rate. Their actual upgrade cost was $2,180, not $8,400. I asked what the remaining collection was for. Luke said Sabrina wanted to recover some of the costs of planning the welcome dinner, photography, and their post-wedding stay at another resort. The $8,400 label was false. Guests were not paying the couple's room. They were funding unrelated wedding expenses and part of the honeymoon. Luke asked me not to tell anyone until he spoke with Sabrina. I gave them 24 hours to reverse every unauthorized charge. Sabrina used that time to get ahead of the story. She posted in the guest chat that a friend had misunderstood an optional contribution and contacted the resort aggressively, risking the couple's contract. She said anyone who wanted a refund could request one after the wedding, once final bills were known. Naomi added a screenshot of her credit card charge and asked where she had opted in. Sabrina removed Naomi from the chat. I sent a concise email to the guests whose addresses appeared on the original itinerary. I did not attach the private contract. I included the original packet, Melissa's statement that no charge had been authorized at the time, the archived public FAQ, and Luke's written follow-up confirming the actual upgrade cost after I asked him to put it in writing. My email said, "Please check your card. If you did not approve a couple accommodation contribution, contact SunPath and your issuer directly." Within 2 days, 14 guests disputed charges. SunPath froze the allocation and began an internal review. The review found that Melissa had allowed Sabrina to add a mandatory group item based on an email instruction, without obtaining individual cardholder consent. SunPath reversed $7,560 in charges and canceled the remaining pending amounts. It also refunded my $640 and apologized in writing. The supposed consent forms had been submitted through the wedding inbox from an IP address associated with Sabrina's home. SunPath did not accuse a specific person of identity theft, but it concluded the forms failed its verification standards and could not establish cardholder authorization. Melissa was removed from the event account. A regional manager took over and sent every guest a corrected statement, separating personal travel charges from organizer expenses. The manager also restored airport transfers for anyone who had originally qualified, including Naomi and me. Sabrina tried to remove us again. SunPath refused because the transfer appeared in the package we purchased. We ultimately kept the private ride I had booked because I no longer wanted our arrival controlled by the bridal party. SunPath refunded the equivalent transfer value. 3 guests who had paid by debit card worried they would wait months for refunds. Luke's parents advanced those amounts after seeing the documentation, then recovered the money from SunPath. Their decision prevented the dispute from becoming a crisis for guests with tight budgets. Sabrina and Luke still owed $2,180 for their upgrade. They downgraded to the complimentary standard suite rather than pay it. Sabrina blamed me for ruining the oceanfront room she had imagined for her wedding photographs. I reminded her that she could keep it by paying the actual upgrade herself. The destination wedding went forward, but the guest group changed. 6 people canceled because the trust was gone, not because the room charge alone made the trip unaffordable. Others stayed at nearby hotels. Naomi and I went because our travel was mostly non-refundable. We treated the trip as our own vacation. We attended the ceremony and reception, behaved politely, and skipped the welcome dinner after Sabrina removed our names from the seating list. The ceremony was beautiful. Sabrina looked happy walking down the beach. For 30 minutes, the conflict disappeared beneath music and ocean wind. I was genuinely glad for the version of her who had once been my friend. At the reception, our place cards were at a table behind a pillar. We ate, congratulated Luke, and left before speeches. No confrontation occurred. The major confrontation happened after the wedding, when Luke's parents reviewed the travel accounts. They had paid $6,000 toward the welcome dinner and photography, believing Sabrina and Luke covered their own room through the group incentive. They had no idea guests were charged an additional $8,400 for the same categories. The accounting revealed a smaller deception, too. Sabrina had told guests the welcome dinner required a $75 contribution from anyone bringing children. Luke's parents had already paid the full per-person package, including children. The $900 collected from 6 families had gone into the same travel account. Those families were refunded. One parent told me she had almost skipped the wedding because the extra child fee made the trip unaffordable. Sabrina had repeatedly described that fee as a resort rule. By then, the pattern was clear. Each charge was small enough or late enough that Sabrina assumed guests would pay rather than investigate. She relied on the resort, coordinator, and wedding schedule to make questions feel rude. Luke's father demanded an accounting. Bank records showed Sabrina intended to use $2,180 for the suite upgrade, $3,000 for a 5-night honeymoon extension, and the rest to rebuild savings after wedding purchases. Luke knew the suite was complimentary, but claimed he did not know Sabrina had labeled the full collection as accommodation. Their marriage began with counseling and separate financial accounts. I did not take satisfaction in that. I had hoped the evidence would produce refunds, not a damaged marriage. But hiding the charge would not have created trust between them. Sabrina sent me a long email 6 weeks later. She apologized for allowing the travel company to charge the wrong amount, but said I had humiliated her by involving guests. She argued that everyone knew destination weddings were expensive for the couple too. I replied once. I said expense does not create consent, and an apology for the wrong amount ignored the false label and threats to my room and transportation. We have not spoken since. Mutual friends divided into familiar groups. Some said Sabrina was wrong, but believed I should have waited until after the ceremony to warn people. That would have allowed Sunpath's dispute window to close for several cards and left guests traveling with hundreds of dollars missing. Others said I should have addressed Sabrina privately, ignoring the 24-hour chance I gave her. I learned that people often recommend a quieter method after the quiet method has already failed. What they really want is an outcome that never makes them uncomfortable. Luke sent me a separate apology 6 months later. He admitted he had asked me to cancel the dispute because he feared Sabrina would leave if the wedding lost its luxury elements. He said he chose short-term peace over asking whether the charge was honest. I accepted the apology without reopening the friendship. Accountability can be real even when reconciliation is not appropriate. The credit card dispute closed in my favor. Sunpath changed its policy to require individual approval for organizer-added guest charges. Carlos confirmed my resort account had a zero balance. I kept those documents until every temporary credit became permanent. Naomi and I spent our last day visiting a cenote and eating tacos in a small town away from the resort. That day cost less than the catamaran I had declined and felt more joyful than any scheduled wedding activity. The condo savings recovered within several months. I bought a 1-bedroom place the following year. On moving day, Naomi gave me a small framed copy of the original travel packet with the sentence, "No additional wedding fee," highlighted. It was a joke, but I keep it in my desk as a reminder to preserve the first agreement before later pressure changes the story. I have attended another destination wedding since then. The couple listed every cost, allowed guests to stay anywhere, and never connected affection to a room block. I spent less, stayed longer, and remained close to them afterward. The location was never the problem. The problem was using friendship and non-refundable travel as leverage to manufacture consent. Clear prices did not make that later celebration feel transactional. They made generosity possible because every gift remained a choice. That was the distinction Sabrina refused to understand when she turned a complimentary room into an invoice for everyone else. I learned that a destination invitation is not a blank check. Guests can knowingly choose airfare, lodging, clothing, and excursions. They cannot meaningfully choose a charge that appears after the cancellation window, especially when the explanation is false. Sabrina said there would be no trip without her wedding. She was right in one narrow sense. Her wedding brought us to Mexico. But once she tried to turn our presence into leverage, I realized the vacation, my money, and my boundaries still belonged to me. If a friend invited you to a destination wedding, charged your card for the bride's room without permission, and you later discovered the room was complimentary and the money was really funding her honeymoon, would you dispute the charge and warn the other guests? Or would you pay to avoid disrupting the wedding?